Hi, this is Bryce with Frostbite Cosplay. Today we're going to show you how we make the rebar clubs that we've got for our Fallout cosplays this year. Now first off, a huge thank you to Hotwire Foam Factory. They hooked us up with some Bounce to be able to do this tutorial and show you guys how this works. They make great products, and a huge thank you to them for sponsoring this tutorial. Now this is what the finished club is going to look like. To start off with, we're going to make our fake rebar here. Now this rebar is going to be made from a 1/2 inch wooden dowel, some yarn, wood glue, and a little bit of iron powder. Now to start off with, in order to make this look as real as possible, we want it to be as consistent as possible. And to do that, we're going to take and we're going to mark every 1/2 inch down our dowel. Alright, so we've got these marks every 1/2 inch. Now we're going to take and cut our yarn. For a 1/2 inch wooden dowel, you're going to need roughly 3 times the length of the dowel in yarn. So we're going to take some of this wood glue here. Now this is going to be pretty messy. You want to make sure you're someplace where that's okay. I'm going to go ahead and wear some gloves just so I'm not getting wood glue all over myself. We're going to go ahead and put our yarn into the wood glue, being very careful that we make sure that it gets coiled up and doesn't get tangled on itself. It's already going to be pretty sticky. The last thing you want is a big knot in there on top of it. Now we're going to take and we're going to wrap this around our wooden dowel, making sure that we line up with those 1/2 inch marks that we've got. Like I said, you want this to look machined, and to do that you want it to be as consistent as possible. If you start to get off base to where it's not lining up anymore, feel free to uncoil it a little bit and go back. You want to make sure that this is as consistent as you can get it. And we'll go ahead and just wind that around here. And there we go. Now that we've got these all wrapped in yarn, the glue's dried, we're going to go ahead and hit them with some black paint as well as some silver paint. Now the reason we're doing this is that any places that the rust doesn't get, we want it to look like metal, not like a wooden dowel. And so we're going to go ahead and, like I said, just hit them with some matte black as well as some silver. Now that that's done, we're going to go ahead and get ready to put on the iron powder. Now when dealing with iron powder, it's a really good idea to put something down to where you can collect the powder, the excess powder afterwards. So to start off with, we're going to take just some regular Modge Podge, and we're going to paint it on everywhere we want rust. If you're doing a helmet or something like that, just down in the gaps or wherever your piece would rust. Because this is rebar, we want to look like it's been exposed to the elements in a post-apocalyptic world. We're just going to go ahead and paint the whole thing. Alright, so we'll go ahead and just apply this glue all over the piece of rebar. I'm going to go ahead and switch to a chip brush since we're doing full coverage, and it's just a little easier to paint large areas that way. Alright, now we're ready to put on our iron powder. To do this, we're going to go ahead and just sprinkle it all over the piece of rebar, and like I said, it's going to fall on this paper, which is going to let us be able to, reclaim it and use it again on the rest of our rebar pieces and things like that, instead of wasting a lot of it. And now all of the stuff we use today, I'm going to go ahead and put links in the description down below on where we get, where you can get iron powder, where you can get the Hotwire Foam Factory products, things like that, to be able to make this yourself. Alright, now in order to rust this, we're going to spray it with a mixture that I learned from Volpen Props' Painting and Weathering ebook. We're going to take 1 tablespoon of salt, 1 tablespoon of lemon juice, 2 tablespoons of white vinegar, and 5 to 6 tablespoons of hydrogen peroxide. Alright, now like I said, this is something I learned from Volpen Props in their book on painting and weathering. It's a phenomenal resource if you were looking to up your painting and weathering game. I've never found anything better. I highly, highly recommend it for just a couple of dollars that it costs. I'll put a link to that down in the description as well. So we'll go ahead and put this in our spray bottle here. And we're just going to take, once the glue is dried on our dowels, so all that iron powder's locked in place, and we'll just spray them down with this mixture, and that's going to cause them to rust. It'll take about an hour. Now, while that's rusting, we're going to go ahead and take our styrofoam and start getting it ready. I picked this up from Styrofoam Foam in Arlington, Texas. It's a 1 foot by 1 foot by 1 foot cube. Now, normally to cut styrofoam, you would use something like this Hot Wire Foam Factory tool here that's going to be a heated implement that will kind of melt its way through the foam and give you these nice smooth cuts and clean edges in your styrofoam. Now, for this, I want it to look like broken concrete. We don't want those nice clean cuts and edges. So for this application, we're actually just going to take this old kitchen knife and we're going to use it to tear this foam up. Now this is going to make a big mess. There's going to be, little styrofoam bits everywhere. So have a shop vac ready and just, like I said, there's definitely going to be some cleaning. We're going to go ahead and just break that up, making sure that we're not being consistent because we want it to look like it's a concrete block that got ripped out of the wall of a building or something like that. Not something that's, nice and well pressed and consistent on all the corners and everything like that. We'll go in and just kind of rough it up, break away pieces, whatever we need to do. Now, like I said, I got this styrofoam foam from Styrofoam Foam in Arlington, Texas. Unfortunately, these big blocks can be a little bit tricky to find because you want to make sure you're getting just regular styrofoam and not the really porous floral styrofoam that you can pick up at Joann's and Michael's. Unfortunately, that stuff tends to be really rough to work with, and on top of that, it'll soak up the sealants and things like that, making it extremely heavy. And so you want to make sure you're using just a regular styrofoam to get this concrete look. Like I said, I just looked up a local styrofoam manufacturer, called them up, and they were more than happy to sell me a few pieces. We'll go ahead and just, like I said, keep roughing it up. Huge mess. Definitely something that you don't want to do in your living room. Alright, so I'm pretty happy with that. I'm going to take a couple of these bigger pieces here and use them to make a couple of small bricks of concrete as well to put down lower on the rebar that maybe had some residual when we broke it out of the wall or whatever, just to kind of add a little bit of extra detail. Now we'll get that all cleaned up. We're going to want to take our styrofoam and put in holes where we want our handles to be. It's a lot easier to do it now than it will be once we've got it treated. We'll go ahead and just kind of bore into it. Make our 3 holes. Alright, and now we're going to be ready to coat the styrofoam. So to do this, we're going to be using Hot Wire Foam Factory's Bounce. To start off with, we're going to take some of their all-purpose foam coat. Go ahead and mix that in there. Now, for this particular application, I'm going to mix this 1 part of multi-purpose coat with 6 parts of Bounce. Now, what this is going to do is it's going to give us a very strong but very light rubberized coating on our styrofoam, so if it gets bumped into or things like that, I don't have to worry about it breaking. It'll hold up and be fine as we walk around the convention with it. Alright, so we'll go ahead and get that all mixed up. Make sure you mix this really well so that you don't have clumps of the powder from the multi-purpose coat in there. You want to make sure that it's well blended. Now we're going to take just our chip brush here. Again, wearing some gloves so that I don't get it all over myself. And we're just going to paint it on the styrofoam. You want to make sure you're getting it down into all the crevices and coating the whole thing so that when you paint it, the styrofoam doesn't melt. It's going to be a really good idea. You're going to want to probably do at least 2 coats. I did 2 on this and it worked great. So we're going to go ahead and, like I said, being careful that we get it in all the crevices and everything, just paint that on. There we go. Now, to let this dry, I'm just going to take a wooden dowel, put it in one of the holes that we prepared earlier, and stick it in a stand and just kind of let it sit and dry that way. Let it dry, do another coat. Now we've got our rebar finished. It's had time to rust. Here's what it's going to look like. And we've got our styrofoam here that the bounce has dried on. It's much harder. Not going to, worry about it denting or chipping or anything like that. It's going to be a very durable, great prop piece. So we're going to go ahead and hit it with some black. Generally, anytime that I'm doing anything that I want to look metallic or stone or organic or anything like that, I like to start with a black base coat. Now, in order to make this look like concrete, we're going to take and we're going to be blending a lot of colors. I'm going to take these chunks of just scraps of upholstery foam from some of our creature builds, along with a bunch of different acrylics using primarily different shades of gray, and we're going to go through and just kind of build layers and build color. So starting with kind of a medium gray, we're going to go through and just dab that on. Now the reason we're dabbing it on instead of using a brush is that this is going to help us to get a more consistent coat, and it'll give us a texture that'll look more like concrete than it would if there were brushes. So we'll use some darker grays, some browns, put a little bit of metallic copper in there, and just, again, the key here is just building up colors, especially down in the pores and cracks and things like that, so that everything has depth to it. Go ahead and just keep going and with different colors, kind of shading it together and dabbing it on there until we get to a point that I'm happy with it. Now, unfortunately, the camera, it doesn't show up as well as I would like, but when you see it out in the sun, it really brings out that there's a lot of different looks. Now, these rough sides here that aren't flat becomes a little bit trickier because there again, you've got to get down in all the little pores and all the little crevices, and we're just going to continue to build up that color. Using darks, lights, different earth tones, black, brown, so just anything that we want to keep building that up. And it kind of, once you get an eye for it, this becomes a lot easier. Add a little bit of sand color in here, a little brown, and just keep building and building and building. As you can see, that gives us some nice variety in our tones. Alright, now that our paint's dried, we're going to go ahead and I'm going to add a logo to this, but I want it to look like it's old and rough. And so we're going to take some water with just a little bit of dish soap in it to kind of break the surface tension. Dab it on there. Put a little too much, so we'll dry a little bit of it off. And we're going to take some kosher salt and just sprinkle that all over here before we paint it. I'm thinking maybe this was, a brick that was ripped out of a wall of a building or something, had a Sunset Sarsaparilla advertisement on part of it. And so we're going to go ahead and go that route, just to make it a little more interesting to sit and hold it. I'll go ahead and start getting these templates ready. I just printed the logo out on some 110 cardstock and cut it out, and that's going to work great. I'm going to go ahead and use some saran wrap and masking tape to tape off the extra areas, make sure that we're not, overspraying and covering the whole thing in there, places that we don't want there to be paint. Alright, now once that salt's dried on there, we're going to go ahead and start painting it. Make sure we put a mask on. I've got an exhaust fan going as well. Go ahead and hit that with some yellow. A little brighter than I wanted, so we're going to go ahead and do a little bit of orange and then a little yellow on top of it too, to kind of bring it down to the color that I want for that Sunset Sarsaparilla logo. And I do apologize for the extra sound here. For some reason my computer's fan's running real heavy all of a sudden, and so I'm sorry if that shows up in the video. But alright, we're going to go ahead and start cutting these pieces out and getting this all ready to go. And just preparing the template. I'm going to go ahead and put that Sunset Sarsaparilla logo in there. I'm going to be kind of cheat and not worry about the lines running through it, just because the way that I'm salt chipping this with that salt on there, it's not really going to show up much anyway. So there we go. Go ahead and hit it with some dark red. Pick those pieces off. Now we'll go ahead and get the black ready. Put a little tape down just so I'm not putting anywhere I don't want it. We'll go ahead and hit that with just some of that black. There we go. Now we're going to let that dry. And once that paint's dry, we're going to take just a little bit of a stiff brush and we're going to wipe all that salt off. And that's going to give us a very weathered look, because everywhere that salt was is going to come up and it's going to show that gray through it, so that it looks like this paint has chipped and faded for years. And give us that good fallout look that we're after. Make sure everything is dry. There we go. Okay, now that that's dry, we're gonna, and we got all of the salt off, we're gonna go ahead and put the bars in. We're gonna go ahead and use some Hot Wire Foam Factory Styrogoo. It's a great glue for putting things to foam, as long as it's a little bit porous, which our dowels certainly are. And we'll go ahead and just glue those all into place. We'll take our extra chunks that we had earlier that we went ahead and painted down to look like the concrete as well. We're going to glue them on the rebar, just kind of wherever. Okay, now in the actual Fallout game, the Rebar club has kind of a leather handle. I like, for the post-apocalyptic look, I'm going to actually go with duct tape. I feel like it kind of fits the spirit of the weapon a little bit better. And so we're going to go ahead and take some duct tape and just wrap it around our 3 bars to make a nice holding handle. Alright. Now we're going to go ahead and let that glue dry in there. Now the final thing we're going to do is we're going to add a little bit of blood. This I'm going to do using Liquitex string medium. Now I've got a couple of blood recipes that I just tested out on this picture here. You can kind of see mixing various colors and mediums and consistencies to be able to get the spatter that I want once it dries. We're going to take a piece of upholstery foam and we're going to go ahead and put some of our blood mix on there. And we're just going to take our club and just whack it down on that upholstery foam a couple of times. And that's going to kind of give us the start for some good spatter. Next thing we're going to do is take a long brush, put some on there, and use a ruler that we're just going to smack that long brush into that ruler. Now, the higher on the handle you smack, the smaller the blood spatter is going to be. And so we're going to just sit and spatter that all over. Put a little bit more and just whack it one more time to keep things kind of nice and consistent. Now that string medium we used is going to keep that looking glossy and kind of like coagulated blood once it dries. And there we go. That's our Rebar club. Fairly easy to make, very inexpensive, and it's a great fallout prop to carry around. It doesn't weigh much, and it has a very distinctive look to it. And so thank you guys for joining us. We hope that you've learned something and that this is useful to you. A couple more shots of the club here real quick. And again, a huge thank you to Hot Wire Foam Factory for sponsoring us with their products to show you guys how we made this prop. Thank you, and we'll catch you on the next one.